I'd like to open the Board of Adjustment meeting for the City of Warrenton for June 5th, 2014. Our first order of business this evening is going to be the minutes from the May 1st, 2014 Board of Adjustments meeting. Do we have any comments or corrections for those minutes? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Deach, second by Commissioner Scott, to approve the minutes as submitted for May 1, 2014. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes. That motion carries 5-0. The other item on our agenda is going to be findings of fact and conclusion of law regarding 610 East Boonslick sign variance. Was that a sign variance? Oh, okay. All right, so you've got that on your agenda. And Mr. Graville, are we simply affirming the findings of fact?
We drafted, well, Jack drafted and I approved the findings of fact and conclusions of law. So if someone want to make some motion, if it looks okay, or if there's no changes, and approve the chairman of the board, I think we have a chairman for Board of Adjustment, to sign off on it.
All right. So do any of you have questions or concerns regarding those findings of fact? Do we need to read those findings of fact
No,
for the record?
we can just, you can approve it, and it'll become, once it's signed, it'll become a part of the this record of approving it by reference.
Okay. And this is the variance that was approved for the replacement, the removal of the old sign and replacement at the current Warrenton Farm and Home store location.
I'll make a motion to approve the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Scott, second by Commissioner Dickey to approve the findings of fact as submitted. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
And that motion carries by 5-0 and now becomes official. So we have no other items on the agenda, so at this time we will close the meeting. Do we need a formal adjournment, or can we move right into planning?
I would
and zoning?
say formally adjourn and then re-enter, since it's two separate boards.
All right, so we need a motion to adjourn Board of Adjustment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Deach, second by Commissioner Scott to adjourn the Board of Adjustment meeting. Questions or comments? Roll call vote. Or is that voice vote?
You can do roll call.
Okay, we'll do roll call.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
He's not here.
Oh, yes, right. Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 with one absence. Okay, so we're closed. We will now move into our regular planning and zoning meeting for the evening. We've got a couple of public hearings. Before we move into those, Mayor Dyer asked to be given a couple of moments, and he's going to introduce our new member to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Are you ready for me now?
I am, sir.
All right. I promise I'll be brief.
Would you like the seat? Just the podium.
I can't. I want to do two things tonight. First thing, I want to thank the planning and zoning people that serve on this board. You do a very important service to the city. We appreciate your time, energy, and effort, and I know we don't say thank you enough, but I'm here tonight to just say thanks. Had a resignation from the planning and zoning board. Ron Dergesmeyer resigned, decided to offer more time to his church and his energy and so forth, so I needed to replace him, and I've appointed Mr. Dan Durbin to take Ron's place. Mr. Durbin's a retired Chrysler Auto Assembly worker, lives here in the city of Warrenton. He also is a realtor. He also has a little lawn mowing business, has a little snow removing removal business, has a little shuttle service business, and he probably has some more businesses that I don't know about. So anyway, I just wanted to introduce Dan and welcome him to the board. So you want to say anything?
I'm happy to be here. I hope we can all work together and make this a better city and a greater city than we've ever had. So thank you.
Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Gerber. All right, so we'll move into our public hearings. The first public hearing we have this evening is on the Hicks property rezone request, and that, at this time, will allow anyone that is here to speak for or against that. Mr. Hanf will tell us what the request is.
Good evening, everyone. First item is a zone change request for a tract of land consisting of approximately 1.97 acres located at the northwest corner of Highway 47 and Villa Duchesne Drive. On April 18th, 2014, a request for rezoning was filed with Planning and Zoning by the applicant to rezone the tract of land consisting of approximately 1.97 acres from R2 medium density single-family residential to C2 general commercial. This request is in compliance with Chapter 400, and I'd like to make part of the public hearing record the municipal code and the comprehensive development plan by reference, my public hearing notice, and the P&Z report.
Thank you, Mr. Hanf. At this time, we'll allow comments from anyone here to speak on behalf of or in opposition to the issue. Please come forward. Anyone that is here to speak, we will need you to be at the podium, and you'll need to state your name and concerns.
My name is Mark Myers. I live in the Lake Chateau neighborhood, and so I'm close enough to whatever is going to be built there. So I have some concerns about it. Let me just list those three that come to mind. First of all, our property values. The economy has already hit us, and we don't want that to continue to be an issue. So we'd like our property to not go down in value. Secondly, the flow of water. It seems that whatever is in that section of the highway, and even the firehouse that is south of Villa Duchesne on the west side, they addressed those things with even going through our yard, our personal yard, and then down into the lake with a huge pipe to take care of it. But there's still issues that if there was a parking lot there, or if there were some other things, I just see that gravity would pull it, and it seems to just, we're blessed that it comes our direction in our home. And then the last thing, thirdly, is a safety issue. And I can speak to this personally because of the fact that when we had first moved into the neighborhood about, it's almost going to be 11 years now, I'd say 2 or 3 years into us being here, my wife was traveling northbound on 47, making a left into the subdivision, and a truck plowed into the back of her car and sent her into the brick. If you have ever been into the road that's Villa Duchesne, it had brick all the way up, and actually she took out a whole section of that. I'm glad she was okay, but the safety issue concerns us with there's really no place to go, it seems, on that highway. And so our concerns is, we've already got a church there, now we have the firehouse there, and so if somebody is going to be making a left turn, I just don't want something bad to happen again, because yes, it is wider, the highway is wider north of Villa Duchesne, but only so much. So those are my three concerns: property values, the flow of the water, and safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. We have other members of the public here to speak tonight on this question.
I'm Steve Peterson from Fellowship Baptist Church. Our property lies directly north of the property in question. And one of my concerns is that we're having a new sidewalk put across our property, and coming from Warrior Ridge to funnel children into Lake Chateau subdivision. That's what we were told. Well, a commercial property right on that, you'd have to cross that commercial property to get to the Lake Chateau subdivision, and I don't really know what commercial entails. I mean, can you put, if it's zone commercial, can you put anything there you want? Could you put a truck stop, or, I mean, not likely, but what can you put on a commercial lot? I mean, is there any limit to it?
There are, depending on the zoning requested, and this is C2 general commercial, there are limitations for each zone, so.
Okay,
so
so
there's a
C2
specific
is
list.
has limitations?
Yeah, there's a specific list of both permitted and conditional uses in that zone.
Okay. Well, with our church right there, it would be very, if something that was open on Sunday, or something that was open on, say, Wednesday night, when we have church, Sunday night, it'd be very difficult, depending on what it is, for us to get in and out, and it's just not something we like to see next to our church. And I don't know what anyone is planning to put there, but it could cause a problem for us. And I'm concerned about the children too, walking on that new sidewalk they haven't put in yet. That, the funnel into Lake Chateau subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Would you say step forward, sir?
Sorry for the speed.
We can take our time.
My name is Al Briggs, and I also represent Fellowship Baptist Church. And a couple of questions that I have relative to, is this highway commercial? Is that what your general commercial is? Is that what used to be highway commercial? Or like you couldn't put could you put a bar in there? Could you put a quick stop? Probably have to have a conditional use permit with anything selling gasoline probably. But what could you put in there that would be better than what we've got, of course? And we think what we got there is pretty good. But the concern that we have, of course, is, as Steve has indicated, that the property, first of all, what about ingress, egress? I don't see a way of getting off of 47. Well, I'm sure you can't get off of 47 with a commercial property there, because of the way when that road was widened, it took a slice through there, and I don't think that you could get off of 47. And if you had a commercial property there, would they enter off of Village de Chêne, which would be probably not set very well with the people that live there. So it's not the ideal thing in our opinion. One thing that I'll mention, that the corporation that owns the property did approach us a few months ago about the possibility of the church buying that property. We have not acted on that yet. Several things happened and we have not acted on that yet. But that would still be a possibility, but we don't want a commercial venture property, a commercial venture for our church there. We don't have any need for the property right now, quite honestly. But it might be a good idea to lock it up so that we can control what goes there. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Briggs.
Jack, do you know right offhand what is listed for that property for C2?
The conditional permitted uses is listed in Appendix A.
I think that's something
Yeah,
that
we
when
need to
we
leave
get
that
into
for
the
the-
meeting, we
Okay.
probably should
All
just
right.
put it up there, and that way everybody can
This
see
is not a
it.
site plan approval.
Okay.
They're strictly a rezoning request.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Hope Tinnen. My husband David and I own the property at 461 Chantilly Court, which is the property that shares a property line with the property in question now. Two concerns that I have. I'm not going to begin to talk about property value because I just don't know how it would affect the value of our home, and that's really not my concern at this point. My concerns are, as Pastor Mark had mentioned earlier, the drainage. We already have issues with drainage into our yard being down the small hill from the property in question, and have had to try to rework our yard to get the drainage to move closer to the road rather than closer to the house, but we still are unable to finish off the basement in our home because of the amount of water that still comes into the house, and continually working on that to improve that. But we also are the parents of 3 young girls, and their safety is probably my most, the most important issue that I have now. I don't know what kind of business could come in back there if that property is rezoned. But of course, my mind is going to, is it going to be a bar? Could it be a gas station? What kind of traffic are we going to have behind our house? Our bedroom windows face that property. My girls are in the backyard, and we don't, at this time, don't have a fence to separate us. We do have some natural shielding from the road as best we can. Our property, the way it sits, kind of has 2 front yards. There really isn't there isn't much privacy sitting there on the corner. And when we bought the house 7 years ago, we knew that we were sitting there on the end of the subdivision there, but we also knew that there was the potential of homes going in behind us. Had we known that there was the possibility of something other than residential construction behind us, I doubt very much we would have bought the property 7 years ago. We would have looked in another neighborhood. Lake Chateau is a beautiful neighborhood, wonderful families there, and it was where we wanted to buy. But again, we wouldn't have bought the property knowing that there could have been a business behind our home, right behind our house. It is a small lot, so it could be very close to our back door. And the safety of my family and the kind of traffic that could come through there is my biggest concern. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tinnen. Do you have anyone else here to speak tonight?
My name is John Cornell. I live at 452 Chantilly Court, which is also in the Lake Chateau subdivision. All of the comments and concerns that have been expressed tonight, I think, are very valid. And I think it's putting the board in a tough position to make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen without any kind. I realize for this rezone, the applicants are not required to present to you what their plans are for this property, whether they know it or not. I think that makes it very difficult for you all to make a decision whether or not to rezone that based upon what's going to be in there. My concern is, and I've read Appendix A on my laptop, a little bit difficult to discern, but I think when you make these decisions, you have to consider what is the worst possible consequence. What's the worst possible situation? To my view, the worst possible situation, a 24-hour drive-through restaurant, a quick trip, the lighting and the traffic that brings with it. And to my viewing, and certainly I could be wrong in my interpretation, it appears that in any of this general commercial, that those are allowed without conditional use. And if that is the case, you're talking about, I believe that the city has come a long way. And the city, when I was on the board, and the city has a history of trying to be business friendly. And that's good. But let's not forget that this is a city of citizens. There's not a need in that location for commercial. As Ms. Tennant said, when she bought, her fear was, or her knowledge was, we could have backdoor neighbors. There could be a home. And she based that on the fact that that's zoned residential. There's actually a road and a cul-de-sac cut onto that, which would lead one to believe that they were going to build it residential as it's zoned. On the south side of Villa Duchesne Drive, houses are built all the way up to 47. One who is going to invest in that community, as I have, as have Pastor Mark and Ms. Tennant, are doing so with the understanding that that is going to possibly develop into more homes, and we're good with that. The latest development on South 47, I believe, was Dry Fork Crossing. And Dry Fork Crossing, the front portion of that is zoned commercial. There are homes behind it. And you know what? Those people invested in that community knowing that they could have a quick trip in their backyard. But that is responsible development, and that is being upfront with those owners who are buying behind it. Now we are, I think, getting the carpet yanked out from under us, and the possibility, what it does to market value, I don't know. What it does to quality of life, absolutely, it's not going to be the same. What it's going to do to water runoff, absolutely, it's going to be an increased problem. I have been dealing with the fire department for 4 years over their runoff from last time, and we're resolving that. Any more stormwater issues in that area, I don't know where they go with it. So I think all of those, there are too many variables, and again, there's a difference between, we have invested in the city of Warrenton. There's a difference between investment and profit. And we as citizens have invested in the city of Warrenton. So I would appreciate you taking all of that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. Do we have anyone else here that's here to speak?
Hi. My name is Tara Levitt, and I live in Lake Chateau at 1509 Angela Court. I don't live right on the property, but right where it would be connected. But I do walk. I have 2 young boys. They're in 2nd and 5th grade, and we like to walk to school on nice days. And I'm really concerned that if there is a commercial property that I won't be able, I'd be really concerned about my children's safety taking that walk. It's only a mile, so it's a really nice, easy walk from our home to Warrior Ridge. We plan on staying there. We have no plans to move, and we really appreciate the fact that we are so close, not only to Warrior Ridge, but to the high school. So we plan on making that walk for probably the next 13 years. So I would really appreciate to have that remain residential. Keep it safe for all the kids in our neighborhood that do make that walk to and from, because like they said, they are making improvements to make that more accessible to all the children in the neighborhood. And if that does become commercial, that's going to be really difficult for us. So for that reason alone, I would like to see it kept residential so that we can keep it safe and keep our kids with a nice path, not only to Warrior Ridge, but also to the high school. So, so I'd like you to consider those factors as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Levitt. Anyone else here to speak tonight on this public hearing?
My name's Darrell Hicks, and my son Ted owns the property. It was acquired at the end of last year, not with a view to do anything particular with it. Lake Chateau was closing out its business, and you all might know JoJo Pella, and she was desirous of divesting herself of this property, and because of those circumstances, Tad sort of involuntarily, to an extent, came into possession of the property so that the corporation of Lake Chateau could be closed out. From the beginning, I was involved in Lake Chateau as an attorney, and the front part along Highway 47 was retained for commercial purposes, and that was sort of the pattern. You can look at Virginia Village, to where you use commercial land along the highway, and then the apartments or residential is in the back. And that's a common way of developing things in St. Louis or anywhere. When you're developing a large tract of land with a highway in front of it. The property across the street from the church and up and down Highway 47 is all C2, to where what you hear about the people talking about commercial just across the street from Highway 47 is all commercial. The majority of the perimeter of this property borders on a state highway or a city street. And any property in 47, as you've all seen, is becoming commercial. We have beauty shops, barber shops, insurance companies. You're getting supposedly a bakery along 47. So through the years, Highway 47, unfortunately, went from residential, in my opinion, unfortunately, went from residential to commercial. But it's just the nature of the things and the way the economy developed that 47 was eventually going to become commercial. So this property, there is no good reason for it not to be commercial. If you're building along Highway 47, you know there's a chance it's going to be commercial. You've got Casey's there, and it's just the way the time has developed here in Warrenton. And I know nothing about the drainage. I know nothing about increased traffic or property values when people bought there in Lake Chateau. They knew that that was vacant ground. You have the church, you have the ambulance district, you have the fire district, you've got right down the street the new county administration building. So it's not residential anymore. It never was intended to be residential. And all 47 isn't. In 47 in Warrenton, if you're going to be business friendly, I don't know how, where the idea that the town is so business friendly developed among a lot of business people. The town of Warrenton is not business friendly. And if you talk to business people, it's not. We talk about the economy, trying to get businesses in Warrenton. If this property is going to compete, let's say, with other property for businesses and business purposes, why should it be at a disadvantage to property right across the street that is commercial? There's no good reason that this property should be at that disadvantage. They talk about property values. Well, here in Warrenton, with property values, look up and down Main Street. 40% or better, vacant or for sale. Look at Section D of the local newspaper. Foreclosure after foreclosure. Ever since the recession hit in 2008. It's sad, but it is a fact of life. I don't know what the future holds, but here we are, we're in it, and we have to live with it. There is no plans for the property. The idea is for this property to be able to compete with identical property, which is across the street. If you have a person wanting to put a business in on that property, he would have to jump through two hoops. One, get it rezoned, which we're here for today, and then secondly, go through the process, the planning and zoning, the site plan and all that, to make sure that what he's going to do complies with the C2 commercial requirements of the zoning code. So And as the church said, there have been some negotiations. Very little, more tonight than any other time, as a matter of fact. Sitting back there, an offer is made and I accepted it. It's not an official offer, but it was made and I immediately accepted it. So there we are. There are no plans, obviously, for this property other than to make it competitive with all the other property that's around it. I'd be glad to answer any questions anybody has about it.
We may have questions during the open discussion part of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Is there anyone else that's here to speak?
Hi, I'm Christy Cornell, John's wife.
We're sorry.
You've heard from a number of our neighbors, some that are being impacted by the backside of our community. There's a number of residents that are being impacted by this proposal in the front part of our community, including my father-in-law, who's an elderly gentleman. I think that, again, like many of our neighbors, my concerns for the safety of our children. It is hard to pull out of that intersection. The speeding is such an issue that frequently if you drive south on 47, you see a police officer sitting at the Baptist church because speeding is a horrible problem there, despite the fact that there is a stoplight that's right there positioned close to the Baptist church. That doesn't seem to matter. Frequently we have semi-trucks that come speeding through there. That creates enough of a concern for me, being a parent of small children, much less the thought of a commercial property going into that community, which would just add to safety concerns in that area. Drainage is definitely a big concern of mine because we have been dealing with that for quite some time with the fire department. So I think there's a number of factors going in here. I would like to point out that Mr. Hicks spoke about, the community seems to be going to commercial property along 47. However, I believe that if you were able to hear from every resident in our community, none of us bought property in that community with the knowledge or plan for the future that that piece of property would go commercial. Every single one of us bought in that community knowing that that was a residential property. If my desire was to live in an area, in a subdivision that had a commercial property, I would have bought in a different subdivision in the city limits of Warrenton. That was not our desire. Our desire was to live in a community that was completely zoned residential. So while Mr. Hicks's son may have bought that property with the intention of zoning it commercial, that was not the intention of any of the property owners in that community when we bought close to that piece of property. We all bought with the knowledge that it was a residential area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cornell. Do we have any others here to speak tonight on this public hearing? Going once, going twice. All right, we will close that public hearing and we will move on to our second public hearing. And that is going to be on Section 425 sign regulations. And Mr. Hant will tell us about that.
Good evening again. This is a proposed amendment to Section 425 sign regulations. I'd like to ask that part of the public hearing record is the municipal code by reference, the public hearing notices, and my planning and zoning report. And this was just a request to look into specifically Section 425.090 standard for signs and review some of the items in there to make corrections to make it more user-friendly for the people.
Thank you, Mr. Hant. Do we have anyone here to speak on the public hearing regarding Section 425 sign regulations? For or against? You didn't all come out tonight to talk about sign regulations? All right. Then we will close that public hearing. And that will take us now to our regular opening of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Our first item on the agenda tonight is the minutes for the May 1, 2014 Planning and Zoning meeting. The minutes are attached to the agenda. All of you have had the chance to review them, so at this time, any questions, comments, or concerns can be offered.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kohler, second by Commissioner Dickey to approve the minutes as submitted. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Kohler?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Abstain.
Mr. Costello?
Yes?
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Abstain, I was absent.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
All right, so if I'm doing the math correctly, that motion passes by a vote of 5 to,
2 abstentions.
yeah, 5 to 0 with 2 abstentions. All right.
And 2
Well, we had 8 of us
absent.
here, right?
And 2 absent. 6, 7, 8, 9.
So we have 6
1, 2,
yeses.
3, 4, 5. Oh,
6
you're
yeses.
6. You're right.
Okay. 6 yeses, 2 abstentions, and 2 absent.
This is not typical. By the way.
That's right, I'm normally not the chairman. All right, next item on the agenda is the Hicks property rezone request, so we will now open the floor for the Planning and Zoning Commission members for that discussion.
Some things that were brought up were very valid points, I believe, but some of the things that struck me is there no sidewalk on that property right now?
It's going in.
Okay.
Taking more of our land and put it all the way across.
Okay, so that will connect the children to,
Yes.
so that was one of my things. And the second one is, and Mr. Hanf can maybe correct me, water runoff. If there's a site plan done, they have to do a water runoff calculation. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that should alleviate a lot of drainage on that back lot, correct?
Yes.
I'm assuming the fire department is not in the city?
No, they are. If you guys recall, the firehouse was developed, it was actually residential, part of the Lake Chateau covenants and restrictions. And they were released from the neighborhood to develop that firehouse. And they did put in a stormwater runoff plan in compliance with our code and really we're supposed to resolve some of the issues. I didn't know there was any current stormwater issues out there. But that's, I think, what some of the neighbors were talking about regarding the fire.
I'm sorry, did he say the fire department was part of Lake Chateau?
Yes.
No, it never was.
It was, they were part of, their property was part of and released from the covenants and restrictions because we were notified by the Mike Kammer, who represented the fire department, when they got released. The neighborhood released them to develop that property from their neighborhood because it was an attractive lot because it was along Highway 47.
There was some negotiation with regard to the lake on Lake Chateau.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but if we're going to have comments out of the floor, we do need you at the podium so that they'll pick up on the meeting tape. So we welcome your comments if you do want to address that.
I thought that I heard that, but Lake Chateau never owned that fire.
I do believe with respect to firehouses, they are permitted in all zones regardless
They are permitted in all
of whether it's
zones.
commercial or residential, so just as a point of reference.
My question was in reference to if it was in the city, it should have a site plan that addressed the water issue, and that was more where my question was.
Yes,
was
absolutely.
headed.
They did. That went in, and it was approved by the city and inspected by the city and went in with the city's approval.
First of all, we typically don't take comments from the floor, okay? So I just want everyone to know the public hearing was to give everyone an opportunity to speak up. If we have some specific questions, we can recognize you, but we can't really have comments from the floor for 2 reasons. One is for the orderly conduct of the meeting. The other is that we have to have all of the comments on the videotape that you get to watch on Channel 3 or 993 or whatever it is. And so, therefore, if you're going to speak, we'll have to bring you to the podium. So, and we really shouldn't take any additional comments. I also will mention for all of you that are concerned, if there are additional points that you decide that you'd like to bring up, all of this, no matter what this group decides tonight as far as the recommendation is concerned, all of this will come before the Board of Aldermen at their June 17th meeting, I believe, and you should have an opportunity at that time to make any additional comments.
Yes, there'll also be a public hearing at the Board of Aldermen meeting.
I do want to make one correction. Our site plan process does allow us to put conditions. That is an element of our site plan. I think the comment was it is automatically approved, but if we do have conditions that are allowed. It can be conditionally approved like a conditional use permit.
Okay.
But there are certain uses that are approved in that zone, and you can't, I mean, I guess during the site plan process, there's some things that you can do, but
You can affect ingress, egress. You can affect, one of the concerns was you absolutely can affect ingress, egress. That's one of the things you could conditionally approve in a site plan. You could require, for example, some road widening, or if traffic was an issue or whatnot. There's a case out of St. Louis County that would allow you to do that in a site plan process. There are some that are permitted uses that would not require the conditional use process, but if you guys remember, a couple of years ago, we added that to the site plan process, so we kind of had that additional check. What would be the difference between a conditionally approved site plan and a conditional use permit? I mean, we'd really have to take a fact-specific project that we don't have in front of us on this. And Teresa, you mentioned I pulled this up, if you want me to read the permitted and conditional uses.
I think we should, there were several questions on that, and I think we should
Okay.
go
Do you
through those.
want me to go
Yeah.
through them? I'll
Yes,
list them,
please.
and you can stop me anytime, because I'm just going to read through them. Single-family dwelling detached is permitted in C2. Duplex is conditional in C2. Multifamily dwelling conditional. Condominiums conditional. Apartments conditional. Boarding house is permitted. Plan unit development is conditional. Residential care and/or assisted living facility is conditional. A group home facility is permitted, but it's permitted by statute in any zoning district. Group home facility for more than 8 persons, conditional. A dormitory is conditional. Cemetery is not allowed. Senior center or community activity center is permitted. Philanthropic or religious affiliated club, institution, or organization is permitted. Animal control center is not permitted. Museums, art galleries are permitted. Art display outdoors are permitted. Opera houses, concert halls are permitted. Library is permitted. An adult daycare is conditional. Child care facility is conditional. Detention facility, private operated jail is not permitted. Private probation officer is permitted. A clinic, outpatient medical or dental office is permitted. A medical, dental, or x-ray non-patient facility is permitted. Substance abuse treatment facility, inpatient and/or outpatient, is conditional. Hospital or other inpatient facility, non-substance abuse counseling center is conditional. Nursing home, convalescent care home is conditional. Recreational facility, public, is conditional. Recreational facility, private, is conditional. Amusement park is not permitted on this lot. Athletic fields, private, is conditional. Athletic fields, public, are not permitted. Commercially operated outdoor recreational facilities, including only the following: batting cages, driving range, golf center, miniature golf, go-karts, water slide, or go-kart track, is conditional. A cinema theater indoor is permitted. A drive-in theater outdoor is conditional. An indoor athletic exercise club, sports and recreational club, gymnasium, boys and girls club, except gun clubs and shooting clubs, are conditional. Billiard, pool hall, video arcade is conditional. Indoor shooting range, target range, trap, or skeet shooting, all operations indoors, is not allowed. Outdoor shooting range, target range, trap, or skeet shooting, outdoor operations, is not allowed. Lodge or other private club is conditional. Church or place of worship, including residential components such as covenants and monasteries, is permitted. Private and parochial with boarding on site schools is not permitted. Private and parochial no boarding is permitted. Public schools, elementary, middle, and second, is permitted. Dance, art, and music schools permitted. Vocational and technical schools, business schools, post-secondary college, universities permitted. All other educational institutions on a site not less than 5 acres is obviously not allowed. Telecommunications towers and facilities per regulations of 405.280 is conditional. I will, however, note with the new legislation would more than likely be permitted. Service lines that just came from the state of Missouri. Service lines, gas regulations, and utility service facilities are conditional. Telephone switching stations and electrical substations are not allowed. Pipeline for oil and gas or other passageways for bulk transport of energy products is not permitted. Indoor entertainment center is permitted. Outdoor facility is conditional. Entertainment center. Hotel and motel is permitted. Bed and breakfast is permitted. RV parks and campgrounds is not allowed. Hunting and fishing resorts is not allowed. Professional business office other than healthcare facilities is permitted. Commercial automobile parking facility, garage or lot is permitted. Offset letterpress, wholesale publishing, catalogs not permitted. Newspaper publishing not permitted. Industrial medical research, testing, or experimental laboratory, non-patient is not permitted. Medical research facility, including biological and genetic industrial research facility, including hazardous or combustible material, is not permitted. Alcohol sales, retail packaged liquor is conditional. Animal clinic, hospital, veterinarian is conditional. Automotive categories, see service centers, see vehicle service, no, that's just a cross-reference. Bakery or commercial wholesale bakery with limited walk-in retail trade is conditional. Bakery retail trade is permitted. Beverage bottling works is not allowed. Bank, credit union, and financial institution is permitted. Bar, tavern, nightclub, less than 2,500 square feet is conditional. Bar, tavern, nightclub, more than 2,500 square feet is conditional. Contractor and/or trade shop, offsite operation and storage, storefront only is permitted. Contractors and trade shops, indoor operations and outdoor storage, including storage of heavy equipment and vehicles, is not permitted. Contractors and trade shops, outdoor storage and operations, including storage of heavy equipment and vehicles, is not permitted. Delivery and dispatch services, vehicles on site, not permitted. Farm feed store, including storage of liquid and solid fertilizer, farm implement sales and repair is conditional. Food service, catering, no on-site service permitted. Food service, walk-in, walk-up restaurants, walk-in restaurants with drive-in and/or drive-through is permitted. General retail and repair of goods is not allowed. Indoor operations, display and storage is permitted. Indoor operations with outdoor display and storage is permitted. General retail, rental and repair of goods, outdoor operations, display and storage, rental of equipment and machinery is permitted. Greenhouse plant nursery is not allowed. Kennel indoor doggy daycare is conditional. Kennel outdoor conditional. Laundromat self-service is permitted. Laundry service walk-in trade-in, including dry cleaning, pressing, and dyeing is permitted. Laundry service, no walk-in trade, including diaper service, linen service, uniform service, not permitted. Manufactured homes, modular building components, sales, and service is not permitted. Mortuary funeral home is permitted. Personal services is permitted. Pawnbrokers and secured personal credit loans is conditional. Seasonal merchants with display of goods is not allowed. Day merchants with display of goods is not allowed. Sexually oriented businesses are not allowed. Shopping centers, malls are permitted. Superstore, big box stores are permitted. Strip mall is permitted. Mini warehouse or self-storage facility units with no outdoor storage is not allowed. Mini warehouse or other self-storage units with outdoor storage is not allowed. Motor vehicle services and repairs is conditional. Motor vehicle body shop is conditional. Motor vehicle wash is conditional. Gasoline sales or station is permitted. Tire recapping and storage is permitted. Truck stop travel plaza is not allowed. Motor vehicle sales, including leasing and rental of new used auto trucks, motorcycle RVs, trailers, and boats, is conditional. Impoundment lots are not permitted. Junkyards are not permitted. Indoor operations, indoor-outdoor storage, no hazardous materials is not permitted. Indoor-outdoor operations with hazardous materials is not permitted. Machine shop welding is not permitted. Concrete mixing plant, cement batch plant is conditional. Distribution facilities is not permitted. Indoor operations, outdoor loading is not permitted. Indoor storage, outdoor loading docks not permitted. Outdoor storage or outdoor loading truck terminal not permitted. Non-hazardous waste transfer not permitted. Solid waste disposal sites, including landfill, not permitted. Recycling collection centers not permitted. Recycling center, including center indoor operations, indoor storage is not permitted. Recycling center, indoor or outdoor operations, outdoor storage not permitted. Recycling process center not permitted. Farm, including horticulture only, not permitted. Farm, including animal husbandry, not permitted. Stockyard slaughter of animals, not permitted. Airport, heliports, not permitted. Helipad is conditional. Bus, railroad depot is not permitted. Oil or gas drilling is not permitted. Extraction of coal, including quarries, mines, and sand, fire, clay, and gravel pits is not permitted.
Did you leave any out?
I didn't leave any out. Want to make sure it was exhaustive.
That entire appendix and the other zones as well is available on the city website. So if you have specific concerns or questions, it as Mr. Cornell indicated, it's lengthy and probably on a smaller screen might be difficult to follow, but I believe it is printable if you really want a copy of the document. So, I had a question. What is the zoning of the church property?
Jack, is it? It's across the street. Is that C3?
I'm talking about the Baptist church property.
Oh, okay. We'll have to look it up really quick.
The reason I ask, my recollection is that in order to avoid spot zoning, we've got to have a 2-acre parcel, or that we've got to abut a similarly zoned piece of property.
Well, we've
That's true,
traditionally.
you can extend it, you can extend it across the road.
Right. We've
So
traditionally-
actual
so the
parcel's
highway
1.97.
constitutes touching the
Yes.
the similarly zoned across. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we clarify, since it's sub 2 acres.
Yeah, we did that up on Veterans Memorial too. We did one across the street, and that's allowable.
But, okay, so is the church, because I'm looking at the map that was attached to our paperwork, and it looked, is the church in an, is the church in an R2 zone, and is there a little strip, it's really hard to see on here, is there a little strip of C2 that goes all the way down on both sides?
This is the proposed land use sheet out of the comprehensive plan, and it says proposed C2 down both sides of 47.
That, what we
This was
included.
done in 2000, I believe.
Yeah, Teresa, we included anytime you have a general rezone, one of the first things we're gonna do is look to the comprehensive land use plan, what it has both written specifically and also with the drawing. And there is, you know, that in 2000 when that was done, that was anticipated to be C2. So we included that as part of the record and also included it for you guys to review as part of your analysis.
But what is on here is a narrower strip than what they are, right? What was recommended in the 2000 was a narrower strip than what they are requesting.
Right. If you guys recall, and this goes back to the Casey's property, the lots were not uniformly subdivided along Highway 47. You can't rezone half of a lot. So, like if you guys recall with Casey's, there was some lots that had large depths, some lots that had shallower depths. And so although that was kind of drawn as this uniform C2 line, the way we've kind of in practice is interpreted it as is the depth, lot depth. Because although the comprehensive plan anticipates a uniform line across, it doesn't, the lots do not, and some of those lots have been recorded for a very long time, do not meet that kind of conceptual line of coming down on a uniform line.
So is the church property currently zoned commercial?
Do you have?
Melody's looking it up right now.
It's C2.
C2.
That's what I thought.
I thought it was.
This is the church.
It's R2.
R2, sorry. Did I say R2
It's
or
R2.
C2? R2.
C2 is on the other side of the highway.
And there's,
But I believe it's church.
next to the church, there's a little piece of ag.
Ag, right.
All right, so there's R2 all in there. C2 is on the other side of the highway, so the connection to make it not spot zoning is
The highway.
across the highway.
Yeah, and if you remember, we did that on Veterans Memorial as well, when there was some rezoning.
So the strip that's shown, what I'm looking at then isn't the zoning map, it's the 2000
It's the comprehensive plan.
comprehensive plan, which shows that expanding.
Is that the C2 would essentially grow down the
Both sides
entire.
of 47.
Both sides of 47 for a width.
But at this point, the closest, well, there's across the street, then there's C3.
Right. And then there's C2 further up across the street
So, okay.
with ag between the two of them. What other,
Mm-hmm.
what other thoughts do the rest of you have?
I always like to go look at these before we have our meeting, and I drove down there this last week, and I turned into the chateau there, and I immediately turned right on a roadway, which isn't finished as yet, which drives into a cul-de-sac, which appears that it was intended to be subdivided in there into lots and residential homes. I would say the only thing that stopped that is the economy. And listening to Mr. Hicks tonight, if we should change this, there is no plans to do anything with it after that. I think the housing market's gonna come back. I'd like to see that stay residential myself. Even if it goes commercial, I'd say you would have to get into it off of 47. And if you drive, I know all of you drove that way, that curve there is about the most dangerous thing I've ever seen. And if we go C2 on the other side of the street, we're gonna have the biggest traffic jam that ever was in there. I would personally like to see it stay just like it is.
For the record, this lot was never part of the plat of Lake Chateau. And there is no dedicated street right away of anything inside of that lot. So how or when that section of curb got poured in there, I don't know. There is no pavement in it. I think there's some gravel in the middle of it, but it's not an existing street.
They got the gutter in all the way around.
Mr. Graville, you said that we could make that part of conditional,
Well,
the
no.
ingress egress?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, a site plan is gonna address
Yeah, that would be
ingress,
during the
egress,
site plan
and you're
review.
talking about Highway 47, that if there's a safety issue, you know, they're gonna have to get the curb cut. I don't know that there's a curb cut off 47 right now.
Anything off 47.
MoDOT has to approve that anyway,
MoDOT
correct?
would have to approve that. And traditionally, you guys have said, like, with the Valvoline, you know, the curb cut, ingress, egress, that safety analysis is MoDOT's, or the Wendy's, you know, we're gonna leave their decision on whether it's a full turn or 3/4 turn, or whether or not they're gonna be entitled to a curb cut up to them. However, if the safety issues are significant enough regarding the residential area, you guys absolutely in a site plan process can require public improvements to the roadway or a turn lane or something like that to address that. And I just want to make sure that the record's clear that, yes, you can put conditions on site plans, and ingress and egress is one of the ones that you can put conditions on.
I don't like putting the cart before the horse because this isn't a site plan review.
Correct.
This is just a complete rezone.
You would have the ability to review it at that time,
Well-
depending on the proposed use.
In my mind, if this property's owned and it has a purpose, then it should be zoned when that purpose is revealed and there's a site plan in force, then it can be rezoned at that time.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question.
Well,
Why
but-
are
Right.
we zoning prior to even having any ideas of?
But basically, that's what happened with the bed and breakfast.
Right.
We
But that-
went across the street to get our C2, and we gave our site plan.
And traditionally, most developments come in that way. Most developments come in and say, here's our rezone, this is what we're doing. But we've also said in planning and zoning meetings, when the rezone comes in, when you, and Scott, you can attest to this, you have to consider any use that would come in. And I think some of the public comments were correct, you have to consider any use that would come in.
Right.
You know, the landowner has a right under our code to request a rezone independent of a use. Now, that gives you the ability to review any possible use, but understand, even if somebody comes in with the site plan and a rezone, that site plan's good for a year. They could get their rezone and not develop that site plan and come back and develop anything else that would be conditional or permitted under that use. So they are really independent decisions, you know? And from a legal perspective, you know, what we have to go off of and what we have to say, is this in compliance with both our comprehensive and our code, comprehensive plan and the code? Our comprehensive plan calls this out on that, a portion of it, as you directed, Teresa, a uniform portion of it as commercial. And that's one of the things, just from a staff perspective, we have to bring it to your attention, and the written section of the comprehensive development plan says it's anticipated that it'll be commercial all the way down 47. So the city's plan in 2000 was that this was going to be a commercial zone bordering both sides of 47 in one way, shape, form, or another.
Something else I point out, you know, in the time I've been on this commission, we've had rezone requests that have been specific to a plan, and we've had rezone requests that have been similar to this, non-specific. You know, as a property owner, if you've got a piece of property that you want to take to market, the conventional wisdom is that a commercial property tends to bring a higher market value than residential property, especially in the market that we're dealing with right now. So, you know, it shouldn't come as a surprise that if someone's going to sell a piece of property, the opportunity to offer it as commercial, even though there may not be a specific buyer with a specific intent known at the time, is probably desirable as a property owner marketing the property. As Mr. Graville said, and some of the residents have indicated, you have to balance the concern and the interests of the adjoining property owners, because the most potentially offensive occupancy or development is the one you have to plan for, even if there's you know, we've had rezone requests come in where the property's under contract contingent to the rezone being approved. And so, yet at the same time, if we make that approval and the Board of Aldermen agree, there's nothing that says that the buyer follows through on the intent of what they stated they were going to do. They could turn right around and say, well, you know what, I see that it's permitted that we could put this, so I'm instead changing my plan. And you still end up with conceivably the less desirable occupancy. So, you know, I don't know what the most compelling argument is. Is it more compelling to say that the people that bought their houses with the expectation that that was a residential zone piece of property have the more compelling argument, or is the property right of the property owner the more compelling argument? That's a difficult question to balance, and you know, each of you will have to come to your own conclusion on that. I will say that any piece of property can be rezoned on a contract contingency offer. So even if this ends up not being rezoned, if there's a later contract sale offer that comes forward with a specific plan, it's always available to be considered at a later date.
And I did want to mention one other thing. One of the citizens said something about a 24-hour restaurant or whatnot. Once again, the site plan, it can be approved conditionally that can control such things as, and we've addressed them before, like with Casey's in the site plan, light pollution, noise pollution, ingress, egress, hours of operations. We addressed that in the site plan for Casey's as well, because there were a lot of conditions, or there were a lot of concerns about the hours of operation. Actually, the Planning and Zoning, the board, if I recall correctly, approved not putting limitations on the hours of operation. So those are all things that can be addressed in the site plan process. So to say that by approving it, it just goes in, there's actually some checks and balances. And like I said, I just want to stress the board from a legal city perspective, this is anticipated under the comprehensive plan, which is the basis of the plan, to have a commercial aspect to it.
Is there any further conversation, questions, comments? Our obligation is to make a recommendation, so the Board of Aldermen can then consider that as they go through the final process of approving or rejecting the request. So,
I'll make a motion that we approve the Hicks property zone change. C2.
I'll second it.
who seconded?
Dan Durbin.
All right. So it's hard to tell. It comes through the microphone. I can't pick up the direction. Or through the speaker. Motion by Mr. Kohler and second by Mr. Durbin to approve the rezone request. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Deach?
No.
Mr. Cullen?
No.
Mrs. Scott?
No.
Mr. Schwab?
No.
Mr. Kohler?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
No.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
No. All right, the recommendation then to rezone fails by a vote of 2 to 6. This will come before the Board of Aldermen at the meeting on June 17th. They will have a public hearing and discussion again, so all of you that have concerns can be present at that time. And we thank all of you for your comments. All right. Our next item on the agenda then is going to be the Section 425 amendment to sign regulations, and Mr. Hanf did speak briefly on that. So if Mr. Hanf, you'd like to go further into detail for us, that would be great.
This is a proposed amendment to Section 425 sign regulations, ADM 68. On April the 4th, I received a request from Planning and Zoning Commissioner Costello to place on the May 1st Planning and Zoning Commission's agenda discussion regarding Section 425.090 standards for signs. This was presented at the Planning and Zoning Commission's May 1st meeting with the approval to have this item placed on the June 5th meeting. And specifically, there was concerns about changing Section 425.090 3E, where it talks about, it is talking about signs with minimum clearances. Such signs shall maintain a clearance of at least 10 feet above the ground or pavement where vehicular or pedestrian movement is possible under such a sign. And it was recommended by Commissioner Costello to change that to state signs shall maintain a clearance of at least 10 feet above ground or pavement where vehicle movement is possible under such sign, and at least 7 feet above the ground or pavement where pedestrian movement is possible under such sign. Also in Section 425.0908B, it was requested to change that the bottom of any pole sign shall be at least 10 feet above the main ground level on which the sign is placed if it is within vehicular or pedestrian traffic areas. And the request was to change this to state the bottom of any pole sign shall be at least 10 feet above the main ground level on which it is placed if it is within vehicular traffic areas, and at least 7 feet above the main ground level on which the sign is placed if it is within pedestrian traffic areas. Sign shall not exceed a height of 20 feet to the top of the sign above the ground. There's also a request to discuss Section 425.09010 banner signs and 425.09011 temporary signs. And on the sections regarding the minimum height, I think we would also want to include Section 429.090 specifically where it's talking about marquee, canopy, and awnings, because in that section, as it is today, it says such signs shall maintain a clearance of at least 10 feet above the ground or pavement where vehicular or pedestrian movement is possible. We may also want to change that to 7 feet for the pedestrians.
Right. Yeah, I didn't catch when I read through those, but they they need to be consistent if the change is recommended.
And then I had two other sections that we may want to consider looking at. Section 5C, where it's talking about ground signs. Such signs may be supported by poster poles that do not exceed a height of 3 feet plus a planter box. The sign shall not exceed a height of 4 feet. In no event shall the post poles, planter boxes, and sign exceed an elevation, exceed a height of 7 feet above the center line of the adjacent roadway at a point perpendicular to the sign location. Sometimes that may not be fair to both sides of the street. If the ground's laying where naturally the one side of the street is higher, then that's going to eliminate them having a possibility of having a ground sign, if we want to take that in consideration. And then on number 7C, where it's talking about temporary window signs shall be maintained in good repair shall be displayed for not longer than 45 days and shall have the most recent date of installation clearly shown on the sign in 2-inch letters placed at the bottom right-hand corner in the front of the sign. I didn't know if that would be worth considering. Do we really want to monitor the number of days on a temporary window sign?
Is there normally a permitting process for temporary window signs?
I don't believe so. So it's just
place it
basically
in honor system?
if you're sending, if you're trying to track them, which may fall back into the discussion regarding temporary signs and tracking of them.
Well, it's kind of a broad list of suggestions, and I know they're all over the map, but they're just either inconsistencies or issues that I think have come up essentially through the process of the city doing their jobs and applying the code as it's written.
There have been a couple awning signs that I've had to deny their permit applications because they don't meet the 10-foot requirement. And I know it's frustrating to them when they look across the street and the existing building has their awning and it's low enough.
And we've discussed signs. I don't know how many times we've discussed signs and sign regulations in the time that I've been on this commission. I think most of you have been in. I'm sure, Mr. Durbin, this is your first time discussing sign regulations as a member of the commission, but there'll be plenty more.
I'm sure. It's gone through a few things about signs already.
I don't know if there's anything more heavily regulated inside the city limits, but I think it's just because sometimes we don't know and anticipate how the rules play until real situations come up. And as Mr. Hanf indicated, with respect to the pole sign clearance in pedestrian areas and the awning sign clearance in pedestrian areas, those have come up in recent months, and I was surprised that rule existed, and in looking around at a number of properties that have awnings, and I know of some other properties that did have awnings and no longer. There are awnings that have signage or messaging information on them that are not that minimum 10 feet above ground level, and I don't think they were put up with any intent to disobey rules, and I would imagine that it was a matter of if a permit was applied for at the time, it was just simply something that wasn't caught. I don't think that any of those pre-existing signs that Mr. Hanf referenced necessarily were intended to violate the rule, but they technically violate it, and they, as Mr. Graville always talks about, the legal non-conforming. I guess, are they legal non-conforming, or are they technically in violation and should have to be altered?
I mean, we would have to look at the specific facts. I'm going to be elusive in that to say.
There may very well be permits issued for them.
There may very well be.
Right, okay.
There were variances granted without any record of any meeting minutes or votes, so we would have to look specifically at each one.
Well, my concern is, I think, if we've allowed that treatment, however that treatment became, however it came to be, if we've allowed that for some properties and businesses, unless there is a real compelling argument why we shouldn't allow future requests that same set of rules, that I think we should consider it just on the sake of consistency. And so that's how I came up with the suggestions that I did.
Would it make sense to have Jack kind of incorporate your suggestions and the ones that he came up with into one document for us to look at and act upon?
That's easier than us doing it on the fly. And probably a lot more accurate and foolproof.
And that way we'd have something specific to look at to say, yeah, we think this is good or not, based on having had time to read it prior to, because you made several suggestions that were in addition to what Scott had submitted, so.
Okay.
And
so as far as for me putting this together for the next month's meeting, Are you in agreement that the 10-foot for vehicle traffic and 7-foot for pedestrian areas is the numbers you want me to put together when I'm putting this forward? Are you all in agreement of them specific heights?
Yeah, those sound logical. I mean, 10-foot for vehicle and 7-foot for human traffic, pedestrian.
We don't have a lot of NBA players walking down their sidewalks.
Well, that's
so-
what I'm thinking. How many 7-foot tall people do we have? We have some. I guess they have to walk around, but
They're already used to ducking.
I think so. They have to walk through doorways, so.
Are you in agreement about removing the section regarding ground signs where it's discussing the height of 7 feet above the property?
Is that would basically parallel what we were talking about on the other, is that correct?
No, the ground signs is different. Basically, how the code reads is the ground sign cannot be more than 7 feet above the center line of the adjacent roadway at the point perpendicular to the sign. And where that's a problem is if the street's here and your property naturally rises above the street, by the time you put a ground sign there, you've exceeded the 7-foot maximum, so it cannot be approved. If your ground dropped off and was lower than the street, it's never a problem. So I just think that the part of it where it talks about it, where they specifically say it cannot be more than 7 feet above the center line of the roadway, needs to be removed. If you just want to say that the highest a ground sign can be is 7 feet above the ground where it sits, I think that would make more sense. Or whatever dimension you want to allow them to be, counting the planters and the post and everything, but to reference it to the center of the street, I think is a disadvantage to some property owners.
And
Sounds
7
logical to me.
Yeah, 7 feet's always been there. 7 feet's been there currently, so just take out the road variance, so then they'd all be symmetrical at 7 feet now, it sounds.
And
Where
this
it's
is
measured,
another
right?
one where we had an application and it was hard to, it's frustrating when you have to explain something that's code that really don't make common sense.
Well, and as time goes on, and particularly along Highway 47, as the state may from time to time flatten and straighten things, they have a tendency to cut and level things out, and that could certainly put more properties above road grade.
So we're in agreement to take out reference in the center of the street on that when I rewrite this and present it to you? And then the next one was for 7C, about the temporary window signs. Do we want to leave in the 45 days? Is that something we really want to be concerned about in tracking?
Who's monitoring that now?
I would say temporary window signs is not my highest priority.
So I would just take it out.
That's late at night.
Well, you could just leave in temporary window signs shall be maintained in good repair.
And leave it at that?
I like that.
Fantastic. Back to one of Commissioner Costello's requests, discussion of banner signs.
What number is that?
Banner signs are section 10. Right now, banner signs are issued, they're $10 for a banner sign permit, which realistically is not feasible for any city staff to process. Get the permit application, review it, process it, monitor it, track it, close out the permit. It also, in the section of banner signs, it talks about each business is only allowed 56 days per year for the banner sign, and there's a couple members of the board here. Recently, we've had where when the business or entities use up their 56 days, then they can have a written request to present to the Board of Aldermen to get an extension of that. I believe they've granted everyone that's been presented to them. Different ones, they've allowed different time frames. But
There are limits on banner signs as to where they can be displayed, is that
yes,
correct?
Yes.
In specific zones?
Yes, and specific sizes. I would like to recommend that we remove the banner sign permit completely and just let us enforce their location, their size, that they're properly maintained.
So you don't want to raise the nomination for the permit, you just want to...
Well, I think the majority of the banner sign applications are more for like charity things and the church things and that. So if you raised it to a price that's, most all other filing fees are $125, I think you would have an extremely negative response to that.
And I think that's the reason that it was initially set so low, was because.
To help out, yeah.
It was just kind of to monitor them, not necessarily to
But
make
if,
money off of them.
if we eliminated the permitting process, we could still monitor them. If we see one that's in the wrong location, or, you know, all banner signs have their names on them and their phone numbers and that, so it wouldn't be difficult to track down who it is. And then we could leave in the code that they gotta have permission from the specific landowner where it's displayed, so someone don't come put a sign in someone else's yard.
And does it say anything in there about being maintained in good condition? Because if you take the time limit off, you may want to make sure that it says that it's maintained in good condition.
Number 7, any banner
Yeah.
sign not maintained shall be
Okay.
subject to the enforcement section of the city of Warrenton or
Yeah.
rescinding the permit.
That's fine.
We'll have to adjust that to the
Get
rescinding
rid
of
of
the
rescinding the
permit.
permit, we can eliminate that.
Yeah.
But with your approval, I'd like to change that section of code, remove the permitting. And then the last one that was on the list was concerning temporary signs, which is 429090, number 11. And on that, it's number 11C, it talks about that they can only be displayed for not longer than 90 days without authorization by the proclamation or resolution by the Board of Aldermen. There is no permitting currently for temporary signs. Same thing, we just monitor where they're located and their condition. I would like to remove the 90-day time period, because to physically drive the town and make a list of all the temporary signs, to really accurately measure this, you're really using a lot of manpower. And then for someone that's got a real estate sign or trying to sell their house and it don't sell in 3 months, there is logic why some signs may be up longer than the 90 days.
There again, as long as the maintenance issue is addressed.
So just add about the maintenance issue. And I could remove number C completely, replace it with the maintenance.
No one says no.
Okay.
Sounds reasonable. Can you hear us nodding?
Dan, you have a comment?
No, I'm perfectly fine with what you're going with.
That is all I have on my list, unless you guys have anything else while I'm changing it to hopefully be done with this section of code for a while.
Jack, do you have any idea how much time your people spend on monitoring signs and?
Different employees accomplish the task in different times, and it varied greatly.
Because I see a lot of signs out there.
That's a non-specific, politically correct answer.
Do we need to make a motion to table this then for the next meeting?
Of course, we have to keep this in our back pocket.
Well, we're not
Everybody will
tabling
sign
it.
their-
I'm making these changes to bring them back and present them, correct? So is it
Yeah.
technically tabled, or what would it be?
Yeah.
It would be tabled, wouldn't it?
If you guys want to approve the changes, then we can have the ordinance ready for approval next meeting.
There you go.
Second then.
To bring it back to P and Z, not to the board, or you want it to go to the
No,
board?
I
Back to
think
P and
they
Z.
want to look, you guys want to look at the ordinances.
Yeah.
Yeah, more informed.
That gives us one more shot at it if we
Yeah.
don't like it.
I'm sure it does, Teresa.
So then we can table it?
Yeah, it's gonna be like the Elks. All right, so Mr. Deach has made a motion to approve those changes to be brought back
to us.
For review and approval.
for review and approval, and I would allow someone to second that.
I'll second it.
Mrs. Scott, any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Kohler?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
All right. That was unanimous, 8-0 with 2 absent. So we will look at that one more time in July, and hopefully at that point be able to send it to the Board of Aldermen and maybe not have to talk about signs again for a while. So anybody, that's it for the agenda items, so we can go ahead and close the meeting. Turn it over to Mr. Hand for his report.
Nothing specific, just give you a heads up. Cannon has started another house in Field of Dreams. They've poured footings and starting on the foundation, so we have one house under construction right now.
Great.
Starting off, so.
It's a good start.
Is if I remember correctly, our next meeting is July 3rd? Is that the right date?
Yeah, probably.
So if any of you have travel plans with July 4th and can't be present, please make sure to let Mr. Hand for Melody know so that we can be sure to have a quorum. I don't want to be the only one here by myself. Anybody have anything else for the good of the cause? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Deach, second by Mr. Dickey to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.